Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
The real world is an honest and occasionally brutal understanding of the challenges faced by police officers in the United Kingdom. It's a demanding, damaging and emotionally challenging role, and it is the subject of a new book by Rod Rose. And I'd like to say that Rod Rose joins me live from the line now. Rod, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Giles.
Whereabouts do we find you? Hopefully not in a holding cell somewhere in Paddington Green. But where are you?
Not today. No, not today. In the middle of Lincolnshire somewhere. Actually, that's where I am.
And so, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you are so eminently qualified to write the real world.
Yeah, I joined police as a service after working in sort of private industry previously. And after having a 30-year career, long and enjoyable 30-year career overall, you know, over the past few years, been dismayed really at the way that the police are perceived by media, press, public, whoever. And so I decided to have a look, you know, at the issues that police officers face today in what I call the real world. And when I talk about the real world, you know, police officers actually protect people like you or I from the real world because, you know, hopefully, unless you get burgled, involved in a car collision or whatever, then most of the time you don't have any interaction with the police. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of the time when you do have interaction with the police, it's because of a negative issue that's happened in your life, whether it be a burglary or something's happened, assault, etc., etc. And sought to address how complicated policing is, what police officers have to do to actually deal with the issues that they face with today. The government website describes policing as police officers respond to incidents, they investigate crimes and work closely with communities to keep them safe. And I looked at that and I thought that doesn't even begin to describe what police officers do. So my book is about the real world, about the issues that we probably don't see or mainly don't see on a day-to-day basis, hopefully to foster a greater understanding with the public to create a more positive approach towards police officers and the role that they perform.
I just want to go back a bit there because you said you had a career. You had a career outside the service first, and then went into the service, which a lot of people go sort of directly into. And also, what I've just started back because there's 2 points to it, and also, what was it that inspired you to go into policing?
Okay, I worked for a company selling steel, basically, you know, shortly after leaving school. Really good company, thoroughly enjoyed it, really, really good company, good people. But then I began to think there's a little bit more to life outside of just making money for a company. You know, I know we all do it in various forms and whatever, and it's necessary to make the world turn. For me, I wanted a little bit more. So I wanted to be able to do something that I thought would you know, police officers, NHS staff, doctors, whatever, we always use this thing about doing the right thing and actually joining something to actually make a difference. And that's what I was hoping to do. And I think during my time in policing, I did make a difference to a lot of people. So that was the difference, you know, between the private sort of sector and then going into the public sector, into policing, wanting to make a difference and work with communities.
So when were you know, an officer itself, because policing has undergone, you know, I mean, I'm 57 years old, so I grew up in the 70s in the West Midlands, and so therefore,
similar.
Yeah, so therefore, you know, it was the old hats and stuff like that, and you knew that they were county policemen and things like that, and you know, and so therefore, it was very much. I'm not going to use the old thing about Bobby's on the beat, but you knew that if you were in sort of staff, if I went to see my dad's store in Stafford, you know, you would see, he knew the policemen, people walking around, they'd pop in and say hello. So you kind of knew, and it was all, I mean, should we go Dixon, the Dot Green and Z cars on this? Because that was kind of
I get that. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. And I mean, how many people now say they'd love to go back to those old days of that? Because successive governments over previous years, we can go back over 25 years, have promised to put a police officer on the beat, a Bobby on the beat, so that, you know, if you have any issues, A, you can deal, you know who to deal with, who to speak to, and B, the mere presence of police officers being on the street actually prevent crime. PCSOs were brought in about 20 years ago now. I was certainly in the job when they were brought in, and you know, part of my job was managing PCSOs, and I think the government at the time tried to bring officers in who could who could actually...
Just what PCSO?
Police Community Support Officers, sorry, George.
Okay.
Yeah, Police Community Support Officers. So that they're not police officers. They are people who perform the role of what the old traditional beat bobby on the beat would do, if you like. So liaising with people, going house to house. If there's any particular initiatives that police officers are doing, they would move forward and advertise them in certain areas and whatever. The issue with PCSOs, wonderful people, and I work with many very, very closely, great people, but they don't have warranted powers. In other words, they don't have powers of arrest. They don't have powers to stop vehicles, to search people. And so they have limited opportunities. And I think it was a way that the government at the time could actually put people who were visible on the street. However, they weren't able to do the things that police officers were able to do and still aren't.
Right, I have a theory on this one, and please feel free to shoot me down in flames or whatever. No, because the thing is, because we've sort of roughly the same age, and we talked about Bobby on the Beat, but when successive governments want to seem to be doing something about crime, they go for the flash kit. They go for the fast response, the body armor, all the bells and whistles and the whole bits and pieces, to the detriment of community policing, so that they can look tough and say, this is what we're doing. And you have people who, have successive Home Secretaries and government ministers who don't understand the integral part of community policing and just go for water cannon, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is the case. Political puppets, I think, is how I've described police officers over the past. Robert Peel was, historically the founder of the police service. But he always said that they were not to be politicised. But I think over successive governments, and we've seen more and more over the years, have wanted to use, police officers as a political puppet to actually promote their own agenda. This is just going away from what the people want, what you and I want. And what you and I want are people who are out there to deter offences, but also deal with things, in a swift and effective manner when things happen. We don't always do that. And that's because, in the main, we're stretched far too thinly, across the spectrum. And I say we, and I'm using me as... I'm retired now, obviously, but, I'm using me as still part of the group of colleagues that are current police officers.
And of course, the public have a, as you said before at the beginning, it's a bit like the judicial system. Hopefully, the average person will not come into contact with the judicial service, or indeed with the police service when they're having to do an investigation. And so the British public has a Jekyll and Hyde role with the police, because on one side, obviously quite rightly, nobody goes for institutional racism or misogyny, of course not, and 99.9% of police officers are decent human beings who serve, right? And when the proverbial hits the fan, you turn to the police, okay? But on the other side of the thing, of course, we have this situation, and the British public, of course, will watch the bill. I mean, you put a police drama in, and everybody's watching, Line of Duty, all that sort of stuff. They love the police dramas and the heroic policemen, and but at the same time, then we get this sort of flip side where it's when somebody rocks up in a with a body cam and whatever else, it's like, oh, for goodness sake, here come almost like the paramilitaries. It must be very hard to deal with that and keep a calm head.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I do cover this in the book quite a lot. It goes from the job, the qualities and role of a police officer, goes on to my first. The book isn't about me, it is about the job. But I have to sort of evidence part of what police officers do by quoting things that I've done. But it goes through into human rights, media, and it finishes with a roadmap for the future of British policing. There are over 147,000 police officers, in England and Wales at this moment in time. And it's sad that a lot of the time, the only time things come to people's notice is when something bad happens that you've alluded to, whether it be racism or whatever. And there have been things on the television recently, programs on the television recently that have portrayed police officers in a poor light. I think, it's sad when that happens and it's taken out of context, because I've said in the book, the police officers taken out of society. And if police officers, they're in general, these 147,000 people, they are part of society, and a part of society, they have negative issues within them. And so it's only understandable that sometimes one or two might slip through the net, but that as soon as they are found out. That's, they are not the pariah that I think are perceived to be seen in the public.
I always makes me sort of smile one, because it's, 40 years since the miners' strike, and people say, Orgreave.
It was.
Yeah, the battle of
84.
Yeah, 84, right. And people are going, the battle and the police and the whole thing. And it makes me laugh, because my cousin was at the time married to a police sergeant in South Yorkshire, right? And he was based literally 10 miles down the road from there. And while people are saying, the police are armed and the whole thing and cavalry charges, and I asked Neil what he did, how it was for him, and he said, well, I didn't do anything. We were like half an hour down the road. We spent the entire summer playing cricket with the picketers, because it's it's Yorkshire, and that goes to that is the side of the policing that you don't see.
Exactly.
Because it is, at the end of the day, although they might be portrayed as sort of ultimatums of the government, etc., it isn't. And another thing is that we talk about the media, is we had this whole thing, and I'm not blaming Guy Ritchie personally, but this whole sort of glamorization of the world of crime. Now, you've met criminals. I live in Marbella. I've met some interesting personalities, and 9 times out of 10, they aren't the sort of people who love their mums and only hurt their own and this, that, and the other. But we glamorize with that whole Mockney thing and that whole gangster culture. But the real gangsters are not pleasant people, and you would rather have a policeman by your side than somebody from a gang.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a program I've been enjoying recently, which is called Brassic. And that does tend to glamorise the criminal element, as it were. And it's not, when you look at it, you've got to take it on face value what it is, because people who I've dealt with, in the criminal fraternity, do not behave like that, and they don't have the morals like that. They have far, far worse morals. But it is a good piece of television, and it is enjoyable. Going back to the miners' strike, I joined in 83. Miners' strike kicked off in 84. I wasn't at Orgreave, but I was on the miners' strike on several occasions. And, I saw very, very little violence, from anybody, and the relationship we had with the miners was overall very, very good. And I had a lot of sympathy and empathy for the miners at the time because of what was going on. But, the violence that was seen at Orgreave is the kind of stuff that you see on television. It's not the true story. It's not the full story. It is just a minor snapshot of what happened on a particular day.
Policing is a job like no other. And you see things as a police officer that hopefully the real, the other world don't.
That we protect from. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You said, car accidents, you obviously have seen death, you have seen domestic abuse, you have seen dreadful things and shattered lives, because that's when you come in, the whole thing. You may have seen children the same age as your own in desperate circumstances. It is not the sort of job that you can put at 5 o'clock, put away and not think about. And that is why the stresses and strains that affect the police. Police we're not back in the 70s with everybody down the pub at lunchtime, but you see what I'm saying, the stresses and strains, they have a very high attrition rate on serving police officers and their families.
Absolutely. And I think I walked away with 30 years, because back in the day, joined up for 30 years. I walked away after doing 30 years, fairly lucky, I think, to be fair. I talk in the book about how I've worked with 7 people who have taken their own lives, all police officers, all male, and for various reasons, and we probably never will know, but, they took their own lives. And that is really, really sad. Chapter 17 of my book is about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the cost and whatever. I like to think that I've actually managed fairly well. However, it is apparent to me that after that 30 years, that there have been things that have affected me. And I do include those in the book. And one of them is to me, it was quite surprising. I won't sort of rehearse it now, but it was quite surprising the way it affected me. And I know with other officers, a lot of death. I dealt with over 200 fatalities when I was on roads policing, and that having to go to the same thing day in, day out, sometimes twice a day, dealing with 2 fatals, that does have an attritional rate on you.
How do you, after, say, 20 years in the force, and you have a situation that you've seen before, how do you sort of still keep an open mind? Because it'd be very easy to say, oh, well, that gentleman is from this ethnic background or that ethnic background. And we had a big conversation on my phone-in show about stop and search and then sus laws going back to the 70s.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I cover that as well.
Yeah.
I cover that.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to be seen to be impartial. So you almost, at the start of every day, you still have to have your policing instinct, but you have to sort of wipe the slate clean, because just because there's a young black, a young mixed-race gentleman in a BMW in a built-up area, late at night, doesn't actually mean he's up to no good.
Absolutely, completely agree. And this is one of the issues that we have, because the police are perceived often, is that a right word? I don't know. But the police are perceived occasionally, if you like, to have these attitudes. What we have to do is have to deal with everybody on their own merits. We don't treat everybody the same. We have to treat according to their particular needs. And again, this is stuff I cover in the book as well. Because, we deal with all sorts of people, and just because they, appear to represent a group of people, if you like, that you've dealt with in the past that haven't had a positive outcome, doesn't mean to say that this group of people are going to be the same. That's not the case at all. And we do understand that. And certainly from a personal perspective, that's the way I treat people all the time.
One of the things is I'm sitting in a studio in Spain. Yes, I know you can feel very sorry for me indeed.
No, very envious.
but one of the things I don't. Again, it's easy to knock the police and say, oh well, they're basically a paramilitary force. Now in Spain, as you may or may not be aware, there are 3 main police forces, and those are the locales, who are. Who deal with smaller items. Sometimes I call them traffic wardens with guns. So they will deal with events in towns, as it were. Then you have the Nacional, who are the guys who will tackle detective crime, and they are the guys who do the roadblocks, and those are the guys who snatch people from Marbella and extradite them somewhere else, and they're in a different uniform. And then there are the Guardia Civil, who were the paramilitaries back in the bad old days, and they handle traffic, and they are you have to be very, very respectful of the Guardia Civil, and there are subdivisions. 3 different police forces, okay?
Yeah.
Again, heavily armed.
Yeah.
What English friends come over and they see, because there are roadblocks. You could throw a roadblock in Spain, which is probably one of the reasons we've got so many roundabouts here. They don't have to have a reason. They can just do, rather than just sort of scanning your MOT, you will come with a guy fully armed. It sort of sharpens the attention on your MOT, as it were. But again, you don't have that in the UK. You've got one unified force. They're not armed. They do the job that in Spain there's 3 different, separate police forces to deal with. And I don't think, it's quite interesting when some British people come over here and they try and give a bit of lip, which they would do in the UK, and they soon find out that the Spanish police don't take that. So I think, to put it mildly, and I think we don't give enough praise to the police in the UK for those, all, combining all those and not being armed and not kicking off, as it were.
Exactly. And I talk about, we're police by consent, and that's one of the basic principles of Robert Peel's back in the 1800s, when he created the first Metropolitan Police Force. We're police by consent, but that has to be what kind of consent? It's not the consent, and again, this is covered by the book, we talk about it, but it's not the consent of the person who wants to go out and do what the hell he or she wants to do, burgle, assault, get drunk and cause all sorts of problems or whatever. It's the consent of the general public, who are the law-abiding majority of people. That's what it should be. But you're quite right in the fact that we have to do all those things. I've been in criminal investigation. I've been dealing with child sexual abuse and adult abuse. I've dealt with, fatal road collisions. I've dealt with, public order situations outside a nightclub at 3:00 in the morning, which is always very interesting, but always very scary, because you never know what's happening next. And we do all that with what we talk about, the consent of the general public. And again, this is one of the reasons for the book, to try and get the general public to understand, the complexities of policing, what we have to deal with as police officers, and the fact that we are mainly unarmed. And I cover that on the back of the book. I say mainly armed. What we have to do is we deal mainly with, the best thing we've got, other than, people have got guns, we've got gas, we've got various bits and pieces depending on what role they do, but communication. This is the most important part of policing, communication, and how you start and end that particular engagement with somebody, will depend on how that communication goes. And it's so important. But that goes back to the policing by consent bit. Sometimes we have to use force, and I cover that again in the book. But, a lot of the time it is about communicating and speaking with people.
When you go onto social media, and it's a wonderful thing. It's a tool for bringing us all together in love and harmony. And two things that what we see is, one, that all the police officers do now are checking people's tweets and rushing around and sending 18 people in full body to arrest them. And B, and there are no-go areas in our inner cities. At what point do you stop slamming your head against the desk?
I don't know. I call it anti-social media. Actually, I've referred to it because there's a lot of things. There's newspapers, there's radios, there's social media. But there's a forum that I call anti-social media, and it's that particular forum, I think, that you've just alluded to there, where people, use mobile phones are great. I'm in love with my phone because it does so many things for me. But also, there's so much, to be totally frank, rubbish that comes through, and there is a danger that can incite people to do certain things. And if I refer back to the riots of last year, when, there was a lot of incitement and people put things online. And it helped to create people in their mind to do certain things, and we saw, people going to hotels where refugees were, and trying to set fire to them. In today's society, really? I just don't get that. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that, social media can do for the good, but there's also a lot of things that they can do. And when it incites hatred in whatever forms, it's a very negative and, not happy about that at all.
What are you hoping that people are going to... I mean, this isn't like go and hug your local Bobby today, is it? Is it a book? Is it just for a great... Is it for a great understanding? Is it just to set the record straight? And is it also looking back at your situation? Because as I said before, the majority will have no idea what the life of a police officer is.
Absolutely. I aim to... I mean, we've seen these programmes. There's very good programs called Police Interceptors, Night Duty, all sorts of bits and pieces. But it doesn't really show. It shows fast cars going to incidents and tea packing and whatever, which is, it looks good. It doesn't show the emotion behind it. So I try to put in the emotion behind it and the understanding the emotion. What I hope to create with this book, and it is a genuine hope, is to foster a greater understanding, from the public towards police officers, to enable them to go to a police officer and, start a dialogue. If they ever see a police officer on the beat and they are very, rare animals, and to have this conversation over tea, over dinner, over whatever, about what police officers do and not just the negativity that they see in the press. 147,000 officers over that, nearly 148,000 police officers are doing a great job day in, day out. And just because you get one or two things, that happen, that hit the headlines, the news, it doesn't mean to say that everybody is like that. And I'm trying to create a greater understanding of what police officers have to do so that the public can actually help and assist. Because if they can help and assist police to do their job, they're helping to assist their neighbours, their relatives, their mothers, fathers, etc. It's a big picture.
The book is called The Real World. It's by Rod Rose, who is speaking today. Listeners, if you go onto our virtual bookstore, you will see the front cover. Click on it, and it'll be winging its way to you just in time for Christmas. Rod, if people want to follow you on the anti-social media, where's the best place to see what you're up to?
Yeah, the book's only just come out. I've got the website will be going live this week, end of this week. So if they just Google The Real World Rod Rose, and there will be areas to buy the book through the publisher Troubadour or through any of the places that people normally get their books. And I will have a website and encourage people to interact with it.
Great stuff indeed. Well, congratulations on the book and sort of showing what real policing is like. The book is called The Real World, an honest and occasionally brutal understanding of the challenges faced by police officers in the United Kingdom. It's by Rod Rose, who we're speaking to today. Rod, thank you so much for your time today, and here we go. Have a very merry and peaceful Christmas.
And you too, Giles. Many thanks.